Well, I was going through a period. It's a long, long time ago now. I gotta stretch back in memory. I was going through a temporary period. I knew it was temporary. I knew it wouldn't last. And I just read that book. I think it was called Stumbling into Happiness, or maybe I read The Happiness Hypothesis. I think it was The Happiness Hypothesis. And the happiness hypothesis basically said there are only three proven ways to kind of be happy. And I forget exactly what all of them were. I think one of them was cognitive behavioral therapy. Another one it said was antidepressants and pharmacological substances. And I actually forget what his third point was. Honestly, I didn't think they were very good. At the time, I thought they were good. Now, in hindsight, I don't think those were what I follow. But I was curious, so I said, okay, let me try this. So I took an antidepressant for 6 weeks. It was one that takes 6 weeks to have effect, and I noticed at the end of 6 weeks that it turned me from a slight pessimist, which is where I was naturally at the time, to a slight optimist. And I was like, wow, this actually works.
Did
But
you
then I
feel
stopped.
very, did you actually feel very depressed when you were younger?
I would say I didn't grow up happy. I was a pretty unhappy person, but kind of for all the wrong reasons. One is I just didn't value happiness. I had other things that were way more important to me. So
Like,
it just, well, like any desire will cloud your happiness, right? Think of happiness as your natural state. It's like the sun shining, but any single desire is a cloud covering that sun. And most of us have many, many desires. So those clouds cover the sun in many cases, completely block it out. And sometimes you have so many unresolved desires and issues and anxieties that they just completely blot out the sun, and it does it for years at a time. Then you lose track of why you're doing it. So I don't think one should necessarily give up on their desires. You're a biological creature walking this earth. You're going to have some desires, have some fun along the way. But just if you realize that your desires are what blot out the sun, then you just want to be very, very careful which ones you have. And if it seems dark and gloomy, it's because you have too many desires running at this moment in time. So it's more just kind of an observation, and it's not to say that I don't. And I would. It's rare for me to be to be unhappy these days, and it's I would have to stretch far back into memory to find the last time I was genuinely unhappy. But at the same time, it's not like I'm happy most of the time. That's not a sustainable state either. What I more go for is calm and peace, because peace, can be converted to happiness at any time. I think I said this before, but I think peace is happiness at rest, and happiness is peace in motion. So if you are living a very peaceful and calm life, but then you engage in activity, you will naturally find that that activity is happy. Although if you set out to be happy, you won't get there. It's kind of one of the ironies of the loaded word called happiness. But I think peace is the real deal, and I definitely think you can find it, and you can find it just by observing when you are and you aren't at peace. But the most important thing is you have to value it. If you value it, you'll find it. If you don't value it, that's fine too. It's just because you're valuing something else. You're valuing career success, or you're valuing finding a mate. Those are actually the two most common, money and the opposite sex, survival and replication. Those are the two biggest clouds that cover our natural innate happiness. One way you can see that we're meant to be naturally happy is just watch little kids, right? Little kids running around are naturally happy. If a
yeah,
child is not happy, you say, "What's wrong?" Right? On the other hand, if you see an adult who's very happy, you say, "What's up?" Which is basically asking what's wrong, right? So it's our expectation that children should be happy, but it's our adults that adults should not. The
yeah,
expectations adults should not. And why
yeah,
is that? Because puberty is the beginning of desire. You can see children when they go from being happy little go-lucky play kids who are playing with whatever's there in front of them in the moment, to suddenly they hit puberty and then they discover desire. And it's the most basic desire, the desire to replicate, the desire to find the opposite sex. And then, of course, in our society, even though these kids are biological adults at the age of 9, 10, 11, we imprison them because we don't trust them. Modern society is more dangerous. You can go get somebody pregnant, and that's not acceptable. You could kill somebody, that's not acceptable. You could die by doing too many drugs, it's not acceptable. So the teenagers are biological adults who actually are held as prisoner in homes by parents. And the parents become these reluctant wardens, and the teenagers now are sullen against them because 5,000 years ago, 14-year-old would have been out fighting a war and maybe raising a family. Uh, and that's just not how modern society is designed. So we have to hold these children captive against their own will, and we throw them into this false game, this fake made up royal pageantry of high school where there's popular kids and unpopular kids, and they just play the stupid false game. But deep down, they know it's a meaningless false game, and so they end up pretty depressed because they're not actually living out their biological urges. So there's kind of this transition from being naturally happy to being naturally unhappy with suppressed desires, where you're socially programmed all day long. And I think in some ways, getting older and and wanting to be happy is sort of rediscovering your original childlike innocent state. But now, a child is happy through ignorance. They don't have to worry about where they're going to sleep or how food's going to get on the table or anything like that. And a middle-aged person is kind of unhappy because they know too much. They're like, shit, I gotta work for everything. I gotta make everything work, or it's gonna fall through the cracks. And and I have no safety net. I am the safety net. And then an older person who's closer to death goes back to being happy like a child, but they do it through wisdom because they realize actually it doesn't matter. I'm just going to die anyway at the end, and this all goes to zero. So all of these treasures that I was accumulating, whether they were mental or emotional or physical, they're all going to disappear anyway. So I think
Right.
that wisdom is a return to innocence, but by way of knowledge rather than through ignorance.